remember being in my first job in one hit. And it just rolled. It just rolled.
Yeah. Yeah. When you live in Vegas, I hate bridges because of that. Yeah. Wow.
Oh, you just texted me. My bad. Yeah.
Yeah, they say that that bridge. No, it's still the same big bridge. It's just on the open side. Yes. And that's going down.
I used to pick it up right off to the left. When you get the heart in your hands on Monday, be sure you can tell the anterior surface by looking for these three clues or structures. You should be able to see the apex of the heart. The apex is the tip of the ventricles. Say, for example, right, you can't really see it here or here. If you get the two Dumbo ears, right auricle, left auricle, those are part of the atrium. And if you put them in the same frontal plane, you're looking at the front, the anterior surface. So those are the things to look for to make sure you're looking at the heart from the correct perspective. And what I did was I put the model of the picture, a picture of the model next to the picture from the atlas so you can see things, they line up perfectly. And if you want to use a model while you're doing the sheep part dissection, you could do that too if you want. One structure called the ligamentum arteriosum, you have to identify. This is a remnant from fetal circulation. That means you are using it as a fetus, but in the adult, it's non-functional. It was like a blood vessel in fetal circulation, but it's just a ligament now. Well, anyways, it's between, blood would flow from the pulmonary trunk to aorta. Pulmonary trunk to aorta when you were a fetus. Because you could bypass the lungs when you did that. You weren't breathing. You're in the amnion. But in adults, it's just like a little ligament structure. So just look for it between the pulmonary trunk and aorta on your sheep heart. A lot of times, the sheep hearts now, they come from the slaughterhouse and they chop all this stuff off, and you may not even see it. Depends how far down they cut. This is the base of the heart, or the posterior view. Posterior surface. It's not the base, it's not the apex, it's the base. And basically what you're seeing is left atrium, right atrium. L-A-R-A. On the pictures of the models, there's other structures in the mediastinum with the heart, like the esophagus, the trachea. We'll learn those later. The other view, right underneath the heart, is called the inferior view or diaphragmatic view because that sits on the diaphragm. Well, anyways, what you can see on this view pretty well. We call it the inferior surface. You can see the posterior interventricular sulcus. you can see the coronary sulcus. Posterior interventricular sulcus is between the ventricles on the back. It's a little groove right there. On the model, it's right here. The coronary sulcus goes around the other way. Okay. So what you have here sulcus is a groove. So in the heart, that groove in the front, the anterior interventricular sulcus, it connects with the posterior ventricular sulcus in the back. So here's the one in the back, dotted line. It connects to the front. So from the apex, it goes front to back. Okay? The coronary sulcus also goes front to back. But between the atria and then the ventricles below. Okay? So study the inferior surface. Now, once you got the surfaces down, you can start to cut the heart open and study the internal features. Like the right atrium. The pictures show the right atrium exposed, and what you can see on the inside are RA, right atrium. Look at the pectinate muscle on the inside. Be sure to call this internal features. Gotta look inside the heart. Now, if you take a look at the appearance of the muscle of the atrium, it looks like someone took a comb and raked the muscle. Okay, so it just describes the appearance of the muscle. Comb-like appearance of the pectinate muscle. Comb-like. That's what pectinate means. The other thing you can see on the inside, look for a shallow depression on the inner atrial septum right there. It's called the Fossa Ovalis. Fossa Ovalis means oval depression. Now, it's another remnant of fetal circulation from fetal circulation. When you're a fetus, blood could flow from the RA straight to the LA, from the right to the left atrium. And by doing so, again, you bypass the lungs. Now, when you're an adult, that valve-like structure closes. So blood does not flow from RA to LA. And you just identify it in adults as a shallow depression called Fossa Ovalis. The other three things I think you should look for, at least in the heart models, are the three orifices for the three blood vessels that drain into it. 3 orifices opening, 3 orifices for the SVC, the IVC, coronary sinus. Those are the 3. Those are the 3 veins draining deoxygenated blood back to the right atrium. That chamber receives it all. If you look at the right ventricle, look at the internal appearance. It's all like, well, they call it trabeculae carne, the appearance. Which means crossbars of flesh. It's just the rough internal appearance there. I mentioned this before. The right ventricle has this kind of funnel shape. It funnels up to the pulmonary trunk. And you call the funnel part the conus arteriosus. when you're in the right ventricle, you should be able to name the two valves of the right heart: tricuspid, pulmonary, semilunar valve. Now let's remember that the tricuspid valve, along with the bicuspid valve, they have those heartstrings called the chordae tendineae. And the papillary muscle. The other valve, the pulmonary SL valve, it just has the cusps. There's no heartstrings or anything there. The valve can open or close by the blood flowing through it. Let's see, that's about it for ventricle. There's the left heart. You can see both atria and ventricle, the insides from those pictures there. And again, I made it a point to take pictures of the model and put it right next to pictures in the book. You can study the book when you're at home, right? It looks just like the model.
Will you be doing the study guide pictures like you did in
No,
class?
no. But here's what I will do. The reason why I say no emphatically, I did something else that's even better. I made a bunch of YouTube clips of me teaching all models, and that's already on Canvas. I don't know if anyone's seen it.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, every single model that I use, I made a little 2-3 minute clip of me going over everything. So that's what you have for this test. I thought about doing the labels on, labels off, but you know, blood vessels are very small lines, and I make a very small leader line pointing to another small line. I think I'll go blind trying to make it. I think you go blind trying to study it. So for blood vessels, that's why I chose a different approach. Video clips might be a little better. Okay. So for the left atrium, still look for pectinate. Do you see how most of the inside of the atrium is smooth? But do you see how you look inside the auricle, it's rough? That's where you gotta look. Okay, so if you know where to look, you should be able to see it quite easily. The pectinate muscle is in the right atrium as well as the left. That's about it. I would also look for the 4 openings for the pulmonary veins. Orifices of 4 pulmonary veins. And for the left ventricle, try to look for the 2 valves. You can see the bicuspid valve right there. Now, the other valve is the aortic valve, the aortic SL valve. Those are the 2 valves of the left heart. Now you can also see, well, I'll just point to it. What do you think the model maker is going for there? The heartstrings, the chordae tendineae. So the cusp of the valve is above that. This muscle right there, that's the papillary muscle. So you still have the papillary muscle there too. So what else can you see? You see these thin lines on the inside of the trabeculae carnae? Those are called Purkinje fibers. I'm going to list that as a structure. You have them in the RV and the LV, but I didn't teach this yet. It's part of the ECG lecture, but this is a bonus structure for your sheep heart dissection. If you can see it, they're like little whitish fibers. I'll show you a picture later, but that's a bonus structure. More on that later. So if you're studying the left heart, you know, one confusion on the dissection is students have trouble identifying the atria. Okay, on the models it's pretty easy. If I see pectinate, that's the left atrium, and the ventricle is down there. A lot of times students will kind of mix it up. The atria don't appear the same on a real heart than they do in pictures here. In the pictures, they're kind of exaggerated, very large. On a sheep heart, you may not notice them as much, so keep that in mind. I did want to talk about the different parts of the aorta because on the big heart models over there, they do show all three parts of the aorta. Before I move on to aorta, were there any questions on the internal structures of the heart? Yeah. Hmm?
Purkinje Fibers, was that the one underneath the, where was that? Is that the white part?
They're in the ventricles. And let me point to them once again. Sometimes I point to something. I forget, I'm standing right here. You're way back there. See that thin red line? All these thin red lines? They're trying to model the Purkinje fibers. What they really look like on the heart, it's pretty amazing to see. I'm going to skip to it since to give you a better idea. See those whitish structures? This is the best I've seen. I took a picture of it. You'll see these tiny white threads. And they kind of look like the same color as the heartstrings, the chordae tendineae. But if you follow that up to a valve, you notice the chordae tendineae. All the other ones that connect all the muscle bundles, that's spreading the electrical signal throughout the ventricles to make it pump blood. And so if you see that, come get me. Maybe yours won't be picture worthy, but you should see them. Okay. This is where I was. Where was it? Oh, aorta. Okay, let's go back to this one. And by the way, so these pictures that I have in my lecture slides, for the first practical, I used pictures to indicate what I want you to identify. I might do the same thing. I just might pull straight from the lecture slides. Since you already have them, I know it's fair to ask, okay? Now the aorta has different parts, and it's important to have different parts. The artery doesn't change, just the name, so you kind of know where you are in the body. The first part coming off, the first 2.5 centimeters, is the ascending aorta. And then this arch is the aortic arch, and then it descends. So you call it the descending aorta, or you can call it the thoracic aorta because it's in the thoracic cavity. Now, the thing about arteries is they branch, okay? That way they can deliver blood all over the place, and you have to know the branches. So I guess they're using a tree analogy, like a tree trunk, but the tree trunk gives off branches. Maybe that branch has branches. They branch into smaller and smaller branches. Get the idea? So anyways, you describe how blood flows. Blood flows through the trunk first, then off the little branches. That's how blood is distributed. So it's very important to study the branches. Now sometimes we call arteries branches, but don't be confused, it's the same thing. Arteries are branches. Now veins are different. Blood is distributed through the aorta, but veins have to collect blood after the capillaries. So it's the smallest veins that collect that blood. small vein, maybe that merges with another small vein to form a bigger vein, maybe that medium-sized vein merges with another one to form a bigger vein, so that the blood is flowing from smaller tributaries to larger ones. So veins are tributaries. Just don't call veins branches. Just don't do that. You'll be okay. All right, so that first branch, the ascending aorta, right off the heart. Let me go to this picture here. The branches of the ascending aorta are right and left coronary arteries. Maybe the first 2.5 centimeters is considered ascending aorta. The right one that I'm drawing is longer than the left one. Now the ascending aorta, that's the only branches, right and left coronary arteries. They're important. They're supplying blood to the heart muscle. Right coronary artery, left coronary artery. Now coronary doesn't mean heart, it means crown. If you were to isolate all the branches of these arteries, they look like a crown of thorns. So that's why I got the name coronary. I'll teach the branches of the coronary arteries later. These are just the two branches of ascending aorta. But the aorta continues as the aortic arch. So look at this picture. I guess the one on the left, you can see it good. Continues on. This aortic arch begins at the level of T4 vertebra and ends at the level of T4 vertebra. So I'll just go T4 to T4. It's an arch. But the three things that come off of it from right to left. 1, 2, 3. They call this the center of arterial distribution. Blood gets everywhere. Okay, the aortic arch, number 1 is the brachiocephalic trunk. That's the first branch coming out the aortic arch. Okay. Didn't we also have a brachiocephalic vein? We did. So that's why the second word is very important when your identification in terms of getting it right. Well, anyways, number 2, left common carotid artery. The confusing thing is it's spelled carotid, but we pronounce it carotid, and I don't know why. Number 3, left subclavian. So then what you should be asking is, well, where's the right common carotid and the right subclavian? Well, they branch off the brachiocephalic trunk. here's right common carotid. And here's right subclavian. So again, let's think, why? Why is there this brachiocephalic trunk that goes to the right side? Why isn't there one on the left side? The artery, the aorta, is already on the left side. So that's why left common carotid, left subclavian, they can branch right off the aortic arch. But to get to the right side, you kind of use the brachiocephalic trunk to get to the right before you branch. The thoracic aorta comes next. You can kind of see that here. Gives off all these little pairs of branches. There's 12 pairs of posterior intercostal arteries. I don't want to draw all 12 pairs, but I'll draw a few just to give you an idea. So from T4 all the way down to T12 is the descending or thoracic aorta. So ascending and descending kind of go together. They refer to how blood flows through it, okay? Or you can call it thoracic, because that's the body cavity where you found it. You see how we spell thoracic? With a CIC. So don't say thoracic. I hear that a lot. It's thoracic, it's just kind of, we spell it differently. All right, so this one just kind of know, we've got the posterior intercostal arteries. The picture shows it pretty good. They're between the intercostal spaces, that's what you can see here. So it runs from the level of T4 to T12. After that, it goes to the diaphragm and it's the abdominal aorta, but I'll teach that later. Don't worry about it. I want to go back to the coronary arteries, because there's major branches of right and left coronary arteries that I want you to know. They're outlined here, okay? And I'll teach these veins as well. So these are the only ones you're responsible for. But let's look at a picture that shows those and others. There's the anterior view. I'll just kind of continue on my picture here. So these major branches that I'm teaching now, they're the ones that, if they get clogged, they can have a heart attack. Maybe you heard of like CABG surgery, coronary artery bypass graft. These are usually the ones they're bypassing if they become clogged. I'll take it back to here. See, we did this one, number one. That's the right coronary artery. It's going to travel to the right margin of the heart and give a branch. Call it number 2. That's the right marginal artery. It's on the right margin of the heart. It's another major branch. Now, the rest of it, it kind of wraps around the back. kind of goes down the posterior interventricular sulcus. Call that number 3. That branch is the posterior interventricular artery. Oops. Well, anyways, you can't see it on this view. It's on the back. We'll get there. But let's stay with this picture and talk about the left coronary artery. It's much shorter than the right. We'll go number 4. Left coronary artery. It's very short. As soon as it branches, it becomes something else. The first branch goes right down the front. It's the anterior interventricular artery. It connects with the posterior interventricular artery, so they connect front to back. Okay. Number 5. Anterior. Interventricular artery, also called left anterior descending. I think Samantha asked about this before, the widowmaker. This is the one. If this one clogs and you have a heart attack here, it could be a large enough infarct. You can't sustain cardiac output. You might go into shock and die, basically. So, I guess there was one that's most important clinically. That is the one. Okay. Now the other branch that goes around the back is the circumflex artery, circumflex branch. I didn't draw it very well, but well, you have the book, because I can't draw very well. Just know the other branch, circumflex branch. Let's go circumflex artery. But remember, a lot of books call these branches or arteries. It's the same thing. It's not something different. Don't let it confuse you. On the picture, it says circumflex branch. Okay. It's the same thing. And no matter how many times I say it, you're going to ask me anyways. It's the branch. Is it the same thing as the artery? Yes, it is. It's probably the most common question I get asked for the heart vessels. Well, here's the back view, and we can see posterior interventricular artery. And there's the right coronary artery right there. I think the other things you can see well. Let's start naming the veins. Okay, let's do that. This big vein that runs with the posterior interventricular branch is the middle cardiac vein. So on our picture there, we would draw it right here. Middle cardiac vein. A. Notice it's cardiac vein, not coronary vein. Coronary is for arteries, okay? The other one I would note is the coronary sinus. All the veins drain into that. Okay. Coronary sinus. I'll just list it. I won't try to draw it. I'll just list it. but I always try to tag it on the back side, really close to the right atrium, because it drains right into it. Right. You know, on the dissection, the most difficult thing for you to do that I expect, I tell students, go inside this chamber, get a metal probe, and stick it inside this blood vessel. Okay? And well, I really appreciate it if you could do it easily and I don't have to show you. It'd be good if you could figure it out. Let's see here. Oh, the other veins I want you to know. I'm going to go back to the front view. So there's a vein that runs on the right margin of the heart. It's the small cardiac vein, right here. It runs with the right marginal artery. Call it B. Small cardiac vein. And the one that runs with the anterior descending, left anterior descending, is the great cardiac vein. So we drew it right here. Call it C. Great cardiac vein. That's pretty basic anatomy. Let's get back to the heart valves. I have this picture here. Let's see if you can orient yourselves. You basically remove the top of the heart. You cut in the exact plane where you can see all four valves, and they're labeled here. There's other things you can see. What if I had you identify this? You just wrote it down. Coronary sinus. That's it. Okay, let's see what else. Identify that artery right there. Well, it's one of the coronaries. It's the one on the left. How I can tell is it's short. It branched immediately. Okay, the right one, look how long it is. It goes all the way around to the back. The other thing I want to note, see the little opening for the coronary arteries? Boop, boop. I also expect you to show me that too. The number one thing that students struggle with on a dissection, stick your probe in coronary sinus. Number two, find that super small opening. Okay, the small things are difficult to find. But you know where to look. It's right on top of the valve. So you're like, well, how do I find the valve? I'll just take a pair of scissors and cut right down the tube. Okay? Look for the orifices of the coronary arteries right above the aortic valve. A little side note for dissection. Look for orifices of coronary arteries. Right above aortic SL valve. Because these openings are right next to the valve, you know, when the valve opens, it blocks the blood flow. When open, blocks blood flow to coronary arteries. As we're going to learn in the cardiac cycle, that valve opens when the heart is pumping blood during systole. So the ironic thing is, when the heart's pumping blood to the whole body, it's not pumping blood to itself. Everything else is getting blood, but not it. And so, but when the valve closes in diastole, blood flow is restored. So coronary flow occurs during diastole. Write that down. Coronary blood flow is restored during diastole when the heart's relaxed. Sometimes that's a test question, so I put stars next to it. All right, well, I just want to point out this right there. Those two little holes, openings for the coronary arteries. Just look for it right above the valve. Okay. I just want you to show me one of them. I'm fine if you do that. That's good. This picture here shows you the valves can either be opened or closed. They open as a pair. Either both AV valves are open for inflow, that way blood can flow into the ventricles. These valves are closed. There's brief moments when all the valves are closed, blood's not flowing in or out. The job of the heart is this, when it pumps blood into the arteries. Okay? If you chop the heart off and get a cross-sectional view of the ventricles, you can see that the right ventricle shape is more like a crescent. It's more circular for the left ventricle. So when you contract in systole, you squeeze blood out. That's how the heart pumps, by squeezing. By squeezing, you generate pressure, you push blood through the arteries. I mean, that's why you do chest compressions for CPR, right? What are you compressing? You're doing that. I mean, I guess it would be better if you could actually hold their heart and squeeze it for them, but you can't get your hand in there, can you? So you have to break. When I see paramedic students practice on cadavers, they break the ribs. And that's the proper way to do it, to break ribs. Sounds painful, but at least you might stay alive, because ribs can heal. Now here's a picture of the student heart. Sorry, the picture quality is not good. It's a little blurry, because I mean, I'm not a very good photographer, and also I'm running around lab, and so I'm taking pictures real quick of ones that are good. But I kind of labeled it for you. The biggest challenge, just tell the front from the back, and you're off to a good start. For your bonus, write this down. If you can dissect the visceral pericardium, I'll give you a couple of bonus points. Bonus. I mean, do you see how it's separated from the heart wall there? Very few students can do this. Everyone can do it, like you can get like, well, you can't do this much. The more you do, the better. Okay. If you show me that much, I'd give you credit. This is the best I've seen. I don't think any of you could do that. I don't think I could do that. Somehow they lifted up that whole nice big gland. Sometimes a lot of you do it and you pull like meat with it. I'm not giving you credit for that. This is what I want to see. Okay. I'm very finicky about bonus points because I don't think you need them. But I know you want them. And the other thing was Purkinje. If you can find Purkinje, just I'll kind of give you some bonus points for that too. Purkinje. It's one of my favorite anatomy words. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back and do the cardiac side. We'll come back at around 12:20. 12:25.